Imagine standing on a muddy school field in England nearly 200 years ago. Dozens of boys are chasing a football, shouting as they kick and push through the crowd. Then, in one bold moment, everything changes. One player suddenly picks up the ball and runs. The crowd erupts. Some players chase him. Others shout that he has broken the rules. The game should have ended right there. But it didn't. That single act of rebellion helped create one of the toughest sports the world has ever seen. Today, rugby is played in packed stadiums, watched by millions, and known for its speed, power, and fearless tackles. So how did one broken rule change sports forever? To answer that question, we have to go back to a time when nobody even agreed on what football was. Long before rugby had a name, football was played in many different ways across England. Every town had its own rules. Every school played a different version of the game. Some allowed only kicking. Others allowed players to carry the ball. In some places, almost anything was allowed. When players from different schools met, the matches often turned into arguments. One team believed they were playing fairly. The other thought the rules were being broken. Instead of enjoying the game, they spent more time debating what was allowed. That growing confusion could not last forever. Soon, one simple disagreement over how football should be played would split a single game into two very different sports. The story takes us to Rugby School in England during the early 1800s. Every day, students rushed onto the fields to play football. But this was nothing like the game we know today. There were very few shared rules, and each school had its own way of playing. Some matches were fast and skillful. Others turned into rough battles where almost anything could happen. It was the perfect place for new ideas to grow. Then came the story that would become one of the greatest legends in sports history. According to the famous tale, a student named William Webb Ellis was playing a football match in 1823. Instead of kicking the ball, he suddenly picked it up with both hands and ran toward the goal. The other players were shocked. They chased after him as the game fell into confusion. In that one bold moment, the legend says, rugby was born. It is a great story. But is it true? The honest answer is that no one knows. There is no clear proof that William Webb Ellis really did this. Years later, people began telling the story, but no one could find records from the day it was supposed to happen. Many historians believe that players in different schools were already carrying the ball from time to time. Football was changing across England, and new ideas were appearing in many places at once. So if the story cannot be proven, why has it survived for almost 200 years? Because it stands for something much bigger than one match. The story of William Webb Ellis reminds people that rugby was built on courage. It was about trying something different instead of following the crowd. Whether he truly invented the sport or not, his name became a symbol of the moment when football started moving in a new direction. As the years passed, carrying the ball became more than just a strange idea. It became the heart of the game. Players could now charge through defenders, pass the ball to teammates, and fight for every meter of ground. Speed still mattered. Strength mattered even more. Rugby was slowly becoming its own sport, with its own style, its own spirit, and its own identity. But one legendary run wasn't enough to create a sport. One famous story may have inspired rugby, but the game was still far from complete. Across England, different schools continued to play by their own rules. A match at one school could look completely different from a match at another. Some allowed long runs with the ball. Others stopped players almost as soon as they picked it up. Even the size of the teams and the shape of the field could change from one place to another. This created a growing problem. When students from different schools met to play, they spent as much time arguing as they did playing. One team believed a move was fair. The other said it was against the rules. Games often stopped while players tried to settle simple questions. Without shared rules, rugby could never grow beyond a few schools. Rugby School decided it was time to bring order to the game. In 1845, 3 students wrote down the school's football rules. It was the first written set of rugby rules. They explained how players could carry the ball, how tackles worked, how points could be scored, and what was not allowed on the field. For the first time, players had something they could all follow. The game slowly became more organized. Players began taking on different jobs during a match. Some focused on running with the ball. Others protected their teammates or fought to win the ball back. Matches became easier to understand, and teams could practice the same skills over and over again instead of learning a new game every time they played. The rough spirit of rugby did not disappear. The hard tackles, quick thinking, and teamwork were still there. But now they were guided by rules that made the game fairer and more exciting. Rugby was changing from a school pastime into a real sport that anyone could learn and play. Now rugby had rules, but it still needed a home. With clear rules in place, rugby was finally ready to grow. The game slowly moved beyond the fields of Rugby School and into towns and cities across Britain. Former students took what they had learned and started new clubs wherever they lived. Before long, people who had never attended rugby school were playing the game too. As more clubs appeared, interest grew quickly. But there was still one big problem. Every club had its own ideas about how the game should be played. Small changes to the rules caused confusion, and matches often ended with players arguing over what was fair. Once again, rugby needed order. In 1871, leaders from 21 clubs came together in London to solve the problem. They formed the Rugby Football Union, often called the RFU. Its job was simple but important. It would protect the rules, settle disagreements, and help the sport grow in the same direction. This changed everything. With one governing body, clubs could compete under the same set of rules. Organized matches became more common. New competitions brought together teams from different parts of the country. Crowds began gathering to watch. Players trained harder, clubs became stronger, and local rivalries made every match more exciting. Rugby was no longer just a school game. It had become part of everyday life. Factory workers, shopkeepers, teachers, and students all found a place on the field. The sport spread across England, Scotland, Wales, and Ireland, with each nation adding its own passion and style. In Wales, whole mining towns stood behind their local clubs. In Scotland and Ireland, rugby became a source of pride that united communities. The game that had once belonged to a few schoolboys was now becoming Britain's game. It had left the classroom behind and stepped onto a much bigger stage. But Britain wasn't the only place embracing the game. As Britain expanded across the world during the 19th century, rugby travelled with it. British soldiers played the game wherever they were sent. Sailors carried it from one port to another. Teachers introduced it in schools, and workers formed clubs in new towns. Without anyone planning it, rugby began crossing oceans. One of the first places to welcome the game was New Zealand. There, rugby quickly became more than just a sport. It became part of the country's identity. Players developed a fast, fearless style that made them one of the strongest teams in the world. In Australia, rugby found loyal supporters and grew into a major sport. In South Africa, it spread through schools and clubs before becoming deeply tied to the country's history. France gave the game its own creative style, while the Pacific Islands filled rugby with speed, power, and natural skill. Nations like Fiji, Samoa, and Tonga produced players whose talent amazed fans around the world. Although every country played by the same basic rules, no two countries played exactly the same way. New Zealand focused on speed and teamwork. South Africa became known for strength and physical play. France brought flair and bold attacks. The Pacific Islands turned broken plays into moments of magic. This was both rugby's greatest strength and its biggest challenge. The game belonged to more people than ever before, but every nation wanted to shape it in its own way. Rugby was no longer simply a British game. It had become an international sport, with millions of players and fans adding their own culture, pride, and passion to every match. The sport had grown far beyond the school fields where it began. But global success created a problem nobody saw coming. As rugby became more popular, a new problem began to grow. It was no longer about rules or where the game was played. This time, it was about money. In the late 1800s, rugby was officially an amateur sport. Players were not allowed to be paid. They played for pride, their clubs, and the love of the game. For wealthy players, this was not a big problem. They could afford to take time away from work. But for many working-class players in northern England, things were very different. These players worked long hours in factories, mines, and mills. Every time they missed work to play a match, they lost part of their wages. They were not asking to become rich, and each would follow its own path into the future. For nearly a century, that division would define rugby. For almost 100 years, rugby union stayed true to its amateur roots. Players competed for pride instead of money, even as other sports became fully professional. But by the early 1990s, it was becoming harder to hold on to the old system. Rugby was growing around the world, television was bringing the game into millions of homes, and the best players wanted to make a living from the sport they loved. The question was simple. Could rugby union survive without changing? In 1995, the answer finally came. Rugby union officially became a professional sport. Everything changed almost overnight. Clubs could now pay their players. Athletes trained full-time instead of fitting rugby around regular jobs. Coaches hired fitness experts, doctors, and nutrition specialists to help players become faster, stronger, and smarter. Training became more scientific than ever before. Every sprint, tackle, and pass was carefully planned and studied. The players changed too. They became bigger, stronger, and better prepared than any generation before them. Matches became faster, harder, and more exciting. Fans filled larger stadiums, while television brought the biggest games to people all over the world. The sport also began to think bigger. International tournaments grew in size and popularity. Club competitions attracted top players from different countries. Sponsors invested millions, and rugby became a global business as well as a global sport. With more money came better stadiums, better training centers, and more opportunities for young players to chase their dreams. Countries that had once struggled to compete started improving, making international rugby more exciting than ever. The game had come a long way from the muddy fields of Rugby School. It was now a modern sport with worldwide stars, huge crowds, and fans on every continent. But rugby's evolution was not over. Then technology began changing rugby once again. As rugby entered the 21st century, the game faced a new challenge. It was still known for its hard tackles and physical battles, but people were asking an important question. How could rugby stay true to its tough identity while keeping players safe? The sport began looking for answers. One of the biggest changes came through video review technology. Referees no longer had to rely only on what they saw in a split second. They could watch important moments again before making a decision. This helped reduce mistakes and made big matches fairer, even if it sometimes slowed the game. Player safety also became a top priority. Doctors and researchers learned more about concussions and the long-term effects of head injuries. Rugby introduced stricter rules for dangerous tackles and better medical checks during matches. Players showing signs of a concussion were taken off the field instead of being told to keep playing. Protecting athletes became just as important as winning games. Away from the cameras, technology was changing rugby in other ways. Coaches used GPS trackers to measure how far players ran, how fast they moved, and how hard they trained. Computers studied match data to find patterns that were almost impossible for the human eye to see. Teams used this information to improve their tactics, train smarter, and prepare for every opponent. The game was growing in other ways too. Women's rugby reached new heights, with bigger crowds, stronger competitions, and more young girls dreaming of playing for their countries. Rugby Sevens also returned to the Olympic Games in 2016, introducing millions of new fans to a faster version of the sport. At the same time, countries outside rugby's traditional powerhouses began investing in the game, bringing fresh talent and exciting new styles of play. Through all these changes, rugby never lost what made it special. It was still a game built on courage, teamwork, respect, and the willingness to stand beside your teammates no matter how hard the battle became. But the biggest changes may still be ahead. Rugby's story is still being written. Around the world, coaches are now using artificial intelligence to study matches, improve training, and discover young talent earlier than ever before. Advanced data helps players become faster, stronger, and smarter, while new technology is helping referees make quicker and fairer decisions. The game is also reaching new fans. Women's rugby continues to grow every year, with larger crowds and bigger tournaments. Rugby Sevens is attracting younger audiences with its fast pace and exciting action. New countries are investing in the sport, proving that rugby's future belongs to more than its traditional powers. But as rugby moves forward, it faces one important challenge. It must welcome new ideas without losing the values that made it special in the first place. If you think back to that muddy school field where one player dared to do something different, it is amazing to see how far the game has come. What may have started with one bold run is now played by millions of people and watched by millions more across every corner of the world. Yet beneath all the technology, money, and professional training, rugby is still about the same things it has always been about. Courage, teamwork, sacrifice, respect, and the choice to keep moving forward, even when everyone else expects you to stop. The game that may have begun with a broken rule has spent nearly 2 centuries rewriting what is possible on a rugby field. And if history has taught us anything, it is that rugby's evolution is far from over.